Hello there. Welcome back to HR Simplified, the podcast where we break down all of the HR jargons. I am Dr. Omar, and today we are going to deep down into the specialist areas of HR. If you are following us and you listen to our episode 3, we try to talk about the different roles in HR and how the whole people service work. Today, we are kind of following up on that, and we're talking about the specialist areas of HR. So the different specialist areas, you've heard different titles. Sometimes it's confusing. In the same HR department, you've got different units, and people are wondering what that's all about. So we are going to explain what each unit in the HR team does. So now, depending on how large your organization is, one person or two people might be doing more than one of this, but in very large or ideally in a HR team, you'll find one or two of these various roles. If you're coming across this for the first time, kindly subscribe. That's how we keep going. Subscribe, share, tell someone about it. If you're a student, you're still thinking about what HR is about, what the profession is about, and what you can do in terms of whether it's a profession for you. Kindly subscribe, kindly share, talk to someone, and of course, you can talk to me about that. But let's go on. So again, like we said, each area of human resources has its own expertise and its own professional community, its own profound impact on the team. And we're going to get into talking about each one. The first one we'll talk about is the talent acquisition and recruitment team. Every organization starts with the right people, and that's the job of talent acquisition. It is the role, the prerogative, and it's the modern recruitment is so much more about job posting, job advert. People think it's just, oh, we advertise a job, we post a job, we recruit the people and shortlist CVs. No, there's a whole lot that goes into getting the right person for an organization. So talent acquisitions, with talent acquisition, we think about where to find the best candidate, how to attract them, what the organization's employer brand looks like. So what's the story that we're telling when we step out there as an organization? Why would someone choose to come and work for us? We need to think about that. How do we design a fair, structured interview process that ensures that everyone has an equal chance? This is another thing that the talent acquisition people are thinking about. How do we reduce bias in hiring decisions? How do we create a candidate experience and make people feel valued even if they are not offered the role? And I mean, a lot of you listening to me may have been candidates of an interview process. So you know that sometimes you go through some process and they really don't make you feel good, but you go through some process depending on how it went. Even if you don't get the job, you don't feel so bad because you feel like you've been treated fairly and you feel like the people have done right by you, so to speak. So talent acquisition is one of the most critical functions in an entire work system. Because if you get, it's just a case of not having the right people, you know, in the system, and then the system begins to collapse. So the ability to recruit the right professionals and support staffs in a competitive market, is key because it's a competitive market, truthfully. There are a lot of employers there who are scouting for those qualified people that you are also scouting for. So think of acquisition as a skilled matchmaker. We are those looking for someone who can do the job today, not only just doing the job, a professional maybe who has a degree, who has a certification, but someone who's got the cultural fit. And for me, this is really big as a person who speaks a lot about culture. Cultural fit is really, really big. This person has to share the values of the organization. They also have the potential to grow. So they're ambitious at least to be able to grow in that job role. That is also key. Cultural fit is key because if you just pick someone because of their qualification, and they are not a right fit for their culture, they're just going to come and then the team becomes disjointed. There's no team cohesion, and you begin to have problem within the team. So that's the job of talent acquisition. Again, like I said, it's not just about, oh, we've placed a job advert, we are just going to recruit, we're going to interview. It goes beyond that to finding the right fit, the right person for the organization, and putting the process in place for that to happen is the job of the talent acquisition unit. Then we've got the L&D. I think one of the most popular unit of HR is the L&D. So learning and development, that's the part that is responsible for the growth of the staff and employee in a company. Now, this covers everything from induction program, from the moment someone is recruited, and we start with onboarding. So some people call it induction, some call it the onboarding program, to up to the point of leadership academies, for senior managers. It includes mandatory training, it includes skills development, coaching, mentoring, e-learning, anything that helps an employee to grow from the point at which they come into that organization upward to the point where they leave, or they exit. Their growth pattern, their growth map. This is the work of L&D. They ask 3 questions when they design this growth program. Number 1, what do people need to be able to do their work? What do they need to be able to do their work? Skill gap analysis. What do they need to be able to do their work? What is the gap between where they are now and where they need to be? This is the work of L&D. What's missing. So this is where they are, this is where we want them to be. What are we missing, or what can we provide for them to be able to reach that point where we want them to be? What's the most effective way to close that gap? So again, we've listed different types of learning: skills development, coaching, mentoring, which is going to be the most effective to close this gap for this person to go from where they are currently to where we want them to be. So it's not just delivery of training. Sometimes people think L&D is just about delivering training. No, but you have to design learning experience that will change the behavior and the pattern of people, learning experiences that help people to grow. And we also have to take into consideration individual differences. The fact that not everyone learns at the same pace. Now, these days, we talk a lot about neurodivergent people. If you have them in your organization, you also have to tailor learning to their specific need. What can we do to help people learn, to grow, and be better? So it's not just about they've come to do the work, we pay them for it, but how do we make them better? In some places, I've seen training being misused. The L&D experience is misused. People just go for training for the sake of going. It was part of my PhD research. One of the outcomes of my PhD research, that one of the organizations that I interviewed, a lot of them were just going for training's sake. The training was not really impactful. It wasn't aligned to their job roles. It was a case of, let's just go for training. That's not the point. It's not about that. It shouldn't be about that. It should be about how we grow. What am I going to learn that I'm going to use so that I can grow in the work that I have decided to do, or in the career that I've decided to do? So if, for example, an organization's manager is struggling with difficult conversation, L&D would run a program, and it's not just running about that 1 hour workshop and say, okay, we've done a workshop and that's okay. No, we can design a program that can include practice sessions, reflection, peer support, follow up, so that we can monitor how the real thing is actually happening over time, and how the manager's confidence are being built to be able to deliver on that career, or difficult, whatever the difficult conversation is. Just so it's not just a case of 1 hour workshop, or we've attended training. No, it's a program, it's a design program that helps somebody grow, and then there's monitoring of that program, there's how it is delivered to ensure that it meets the needs of the organization. The other one is OD and culture, organizational development and culture. So when you hear OD, we're talking about organizational development. The OD department, one of the most misunderstood areas of HR, but also one of the most powerful. Sometimes people wonder, what are OD partners doing? OD specialists, they work on the health of the organization itself. So they ask questions like, why does this team keep having the same conflict? Why does change keep failing here? What does the culture look like in practice as opposed to what it says on the wall? So sometimes it's different what's on the policy, what's on paper is different sometimes in practice. And it's the OD specialists who ask this question: what needs to shift in the way people lead and relate to each other for the organizations to try? So they're even questioning the leadership, they're questioning the culture, they're looking at how do we do things in the organization? Are we doing things right? Are people thriving? Is our organization a place where people want to work, where they want to grow, where they want to stay? Because as we all know, the cost of new hires is really, really high. And we would rather, grow and develop the ones that we have with us than go get new ones. So they use psychological frameworks, facilitation techniques, diagnostic tools, to understand the organization's system and help them to work better, help the organization to work better. So if L&D is developing people, OD is actually developing the organization. That's one good way to separate it or to make it clear. So how the organization itself develops, how they groom their culture, how they create the culture of the environment is of the organization, not the environment really, of the organization is OD's business. So if, for example, let's give an example that will help you understand. If you have a department in the organization that has poor engagement scores and high staff turnover, for example, OD is a function that checks why this is happening and design an intervention that can help us address the root cause, not just the system, the root cause of why that is happening, and then create policies or create um, a system that corrects that. Then number 4 is the employee relations. ER, as some people call it, is part of HR that deals with employers and employee relationship, especially when there is difficulty and when it becomes challenging. Sometimes many people say this is the most difficult aspect of human resources because you are dealing with people's issues, you're dealing with cases, you're dealing with grievances, you're dealing with absences, you're dealing with poor conduct, you're dealing with, all of the restructuring, negotiation, consultation, trade unionism, which people run from, absence management, one of the most challenging areas of ER cases, tribunals, people don't want to hear all of that. But this is so this is what ER is about. And to work effectively here, one needs to be abreast of the employment laws. You really need to know what is going on with the employment laws of the country where your organization is functioning or practicing in, and ensure that. So what I like about ER, or what I always advise about ER, is to be proactive in preventing the cases so they don't escalate and they don't become, you know, things that we're not dealing with. We're talking about disciplinary processes, talking about tribunals, always have that conversation in the first instance. One, if the other departments are also doing the right thing, for example, L&D, OD, working together to teach and to ensure that policies are up to date and people are aware of these policies, it will proactively reduce the number of issues that will begin to arise in an organization. Problem comes when we are not following policies, when there are no compliances, or when people just totally ignore what they should be doing in the system, and then issues begin to come up. But when this issue comes up, ER specialists are the ones who actually need to deal with them, and they deal with them as much and as fair as they can. It requires an exceptional blend of legal knowledge. So Again, like I said, you really need to know the employment laws, emotional intelligence, and moral courage. Now, that moral courage is a big deal because sometimes you hear some cases and you're like, oh my God, what is this person really thinking about? And then sometimes you also get some managers who want to cut corners and they are trying to, say, okay, why don't we do it this way? And if you follow that route, a precedence is set. Um, and one major thing that collapses ER cases or that makes ER cases become more complicated in an organization is when um, we are not consistent, we're not holding the line with our policies. So sometimes when it's Mr. A, we are biased. And when we bring all of that into it, it makes it more complicated. So that moral courage is really important. You need to know the law, but you need to understand people deeply enough to find resolutions that are fair for everyone, not just what you can technically defend. So yes, it can be technically defended, but is it fair on that person? And you have to treat each case on its own merit, not based off of, yeah, there could be precedents, you could refer to what has happened in the past, but it's always good to holistically look at each case. So if a manager raises a concern, for example, in a team about someone that is regularly late or meeting target, I will work with the managers to enjoy the full picture. Many people think that the very first thing is a disciplinary process. No, it's usually to check what the personal circumstances are, what are the support that can be given, what reasonable adjustments can be made, what are the legal obligations of the employer to this person or to that team, what are the legal also obligations of the employee before advising on the most appropriate course of action. Number 5 is reward and benefit. In some organizations, this is not separate, but there are specialists that talk about how organizations pay, recognize their people. So it's not just about salary. It talks about putting together a good benefit package that keeps people working for you. And these benefit packages can include pension schemes, flexible working arrangements, recognition programs, bonus structures, anything else that forms, something that you can call a reward within an organization. So good reward professionals understand that fair pay is a matter of both retention and justice. If you don't pay people well, they're going to leave. They're going to go to an organization that pay better. So pay inequality, particularly among gender and ethnic lines, is something that reward specialists always monitor. It's a serious issue in many organizations. It's something that is being reported all the time. And these reward specialists help us identify when these pay issues are going to come up so we can deal with them before they happen. And to do that, a lot of organizations publish what they call the pay gap report. It is the reward team that does this. They analyze the data, they understand what is driving the gap, and what works with leadership. They also work with leadership, sorry, to be able to design a strategy to close the gap if gaps are noticed or identified. And then number 6, we talk about equality, diversity, and inclusion. The another aspect of HR that I really like because I like being fair. Equality, diversity, and inclusion, often called EDI, is one of the most fastest growing specialist area of HR. These days, there's a lot of talk about diversity. What we do about it, it's a different story, that's a different ballgame, but there's a whole lot of talk about it. EDI specialists, they work to ensure that everyone in an organization is treated fairly and have equal access to opportunities and can bring their whole self to work. So that's a new term that we've started using in HR now, talking about bringing your whole self to work, not hiding who you are. And then for the organization to be able to create an opportunity where your whole self thrives. For a lot of organizations, this includes monitoring and improving performance against the workforce data, workforce policy that you have. In some cases, is they check the disability standard. What are the policies around it? The Equality Act in the country where we are does help us with the national framework. that we work against, to ensure we work with, not against, to ensure that everyone is treated fairly at work and we're accountable for the experience of staff, especially staffs who are protected characteristics. So there's always the, for example, data around Black and ethnic majority and how this data works in many organizations. I was at a particular office, and I'm just going to say this. I was at a particular office in Manchester some weeks back, and I could see just from the door up until all of the people who served me and all the people that I spoke to were people of a particular descent, people from a particular tribe or race. And I was thinking to myself, where is the equality and where is diversity in this organization? How can you have an organization that the person who opens the door is from, I don't want to mention where they're from, it's from this particular tribe. And then the person who is giving the numbers, the person who is sitting at the desk, the customer service, the people attend, everyone, and I'm not joking, everyone. In fact, to make it even more unprofessional, they were even speaking their language. So you're sitting in their front and they're speaking with each other and they're speaking their language. And I'm like, my goodness, this is so unprofessional. We've gone beyond that in this age and time. People should not be working in that kind of environment where it's like a tribal business. Anyways, okay, so that's the work of the EDI specialist, to ensure that there is enough data to support the work that we do and support everyone to come to work, design, targeted interventions and track improvement over time, for that balance of diversity in an organization. Number 7 is the workforce planning and analytics. Analysis is a big deal these days because we're talking a lot about data in human resources. Workforce planning specialists help organizations prepare for the future. They ensure they have the right number of people, we have the right number of skills in the right place at the right time. So there's lots of analysis going on. Again, like I said, has become an increasingly data-driven discipline. People now use workforce analytics to model future demand. I remember when I joined human resources some 15 years back, that was when we started having the conversation in my country then about HR analytics, and not many people understood what they were talking about. But we had challenges defending budgets, HR budgets, challenges defending learning budgets, because we couldn't HR didn't have data to support the work they were doing. But that's changing now. Um, we've gone beyond just having data to support the work we're doing. We are now doing predictive analysis. We're doing analysis of the future. We're identifying skill gaps. We're supporting strategic planning. So we're talking about succession planning. We're talking about people who are retiring. If people are leaving, who are those who will come in, who will step into the gap when people leave. So it's the work with the talent acquisition unit to ensure that we design a recruitment and succession pipeline and advise leadership on the investment that is needed to be able to prevent a crisis. So you don't want people leaving where they have not taught the next people how to work. So these are the 7 areas that I believe are the specialist area in HR that makes up the team. If I have left out anyone, let me know. Talk about it in the comment. Drop that department in the comment box. Maybe there is a department in your own HR, or no, there's a unit in your HR department that does something that I have not mentioned. Please drop it in the comment and let's talk about it. Let's all learn together. Let's now talk quickly about how this specialist team work together. So think of someone starting a new job, for example. Let's use a hospital. um, every single HR specialism has a role to play in the experience of this person who is starting a new job. So maybe in the NHS, we have just recruited a doctor. Talent acquisition are the people who found them, and made them feel excited about their role, make them feel like, before they even join the department, the organization, make them feel like they are part of the organization. L&D will design their induction and their ongoing training as they come into the organization. Reward will ensure that they are paid fully and they understand their benefits. OD will shape the culture and the values that they work into to ensure Psychological safety. Psychological safety is a big deal for me, that they're able to thrive in the culture and that they are also a cultural fit. ER is there if anything goes wrong, if they're not treated fairly, or if there's any issues at all, any challenges, ER will deal with it. EGI is also working to ensure that they are treated equitably, regardless of their background, whether they are, from minority or majority. Lots of titles these days. Just ensure that everyone is covered and treated equitably. And then the workforce planning will anticipate what this role needs and ensure that the funding that they need for that role is in place. So every specialism matters, every unit matter, and the best HR functions are the ones where all of these areas work together with a shared purpose. So we're a team. Sometimes in some department, in some HR department, these teams, these units work in silos. You discover that the talent acquisition is working differently from the L&D. That doesn't help us to work best. So thank you for listening to this episode. This is episode 5 of HR Simplify. Thank you for listening to this episode. If it has given you something to think about, please subscribe. Um, Share it, leave a comment, leave a review. It helps people to find the show as you leave a comment. Again, like I said, if there's any specialism you think I've left out of the 7 that we've listed here today, please drop that comment for us. Share the episode with a friend, with your colleague, with a manager, with a student, with someone who's learning. I'm looking into creating a book from these episodes of HR Simplified, something that might go in the line of a textbook, so people can always have it handy, especially the students. I'm really, really interested in catching them young and getting people more into the HR profession. So send me your questions. If you have a question, send me your questions. Tell me what's confusing you. You're looking into becoming a HR professional. You don't know how to go about it. You want some mentoring, you want some coaching. Hit me up. I've now created a WhatsApp channel where you can come to us, where you can talk to us about what you need in terms of mentoring you to become a HR professional. Next episode, we will decode some of the jargons and buzzwords in HR. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you again soon. Take care.